Latetia, and we are now recording. Latetia is an active duty personnel officer in the United States Air Force who has served over 12 years. She currently serves as the Deputy Force Support Squadron Commander at Buckley Space Force Base in Colorado. She runs a 250 plus person squadron governing all things human resource, manpower, morale, welfare, and recreation for 15,000 people. Yes, ma'am. In and out of uniform, Latetia is passionate about healing of all survivors of trauma. During her career, she has had the opportunity to serve as a sexual assault response coordinator, a SARC. And as a SARC, and throughout her military career, she trained thousands of Department of Defense civilians and military members on enthusiastic consent, diversity inclusion, trauma informed care, cultural competency, and empathetic and inclusive responses to trauma. During and after her Master's of Social Work program, she served as a civilian volunteer counselor with the Center for Sexual Assault Survivors in Newport News, Virginia, advocating for victims in the hospital, coordinating support, running a weekly support group, and conducting community education. She has had the honor of conducting training with NOVA in the past under the Military Members and Families Project on topics around military sexual trauma and its impact. She is a passionate speaker and advocate working diligently for survivors on their journey of healing, as well as building, educating communities ready to support them. Latetia, thank you so much for being here with us today. The floor is yours. I'm so excited to hear what you're discussing today.
Oh man. First of all, thank you so much, Alana. You have the most soothing voice under the sun. So thank you. And just thank you for saying all those wonderful things. Whew, no pressure. Really excited to be here tonight. Uh, like we said in the introduction, one of the things I do and I love doing is every Wednesday I have a support group with a fantastic group of survivors who identify as women. And we, every week, we take a moment to ourselves to kind of bring us into the space. And so I'd like to invite us to do that. You can, if you would like, you also do not have to, but I just want us to take one very big diaphragmatic, so big, big belly breath together so that we can come into this space and talk about a harder topic, but hopefully an informative topic tonight. So if you will join me, if that feels comfortable for your spirit tonight, I want y'all to just take a big 4 count breath in, fill up the belly with as much air, and then blow it out. Big old breath. If you want to do another one, go ahead. What that allows us to do is sometimes just ground back into our bodies for a second. So thank you if you joined me. Thank you if you didn't join me, because we love a good boundary around here. So thank you. We will get into this discussion right now. Let me go ahead and share my slides, and we will talk about moral injury. And actually, this is different from the last time I taught this, but I wanted to start actually with a story. And so I want to say thank you, first of all, to Stephanie and San for offering this space in general to be able to talk about some of these topics and to allow a space of vulnerability for us to share and hopefully find out more about each other, and then just the things that we can do to show up for one another, show up for ourselves in a great way. Before I tell my story, can you all see the slides, like the main slide, or does it look like the presentation screen, like the presenter screen? It's those slides. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I just want to make sure it's all good to go. So one of the reasons that I really love this topic of moral injury, and one of the reasons that I do this work, is because I'm also a 2-time military sexual trauma survivor. And I actually became a survivor while I was getting into this work. And so my super ego and how I defined myself was that I was this person who would advocate for anybody. I was a good boundary setter. I could teach people about boundaries. I was a trauma-informed leader. I was studying this material. Like, I knew what I was talking about. And my super ego was like, yes, girl, this is you. This is your community. You know what to do. And then I was harmed. And what that taught me was that maybe I am not the person I thought I was. Maybe those values are not inherent to who I am. And now, who am I? And so that led me on this journey of like, what is this feeling? And then how do we talk about it? How do we define it? And that's how I got to moral injury, talking to some phenomenal educators in the community about military members whose kind of self-efficacy is wrapped up in their morals and these values that we're taught. And we'll get into that. And how sometimes a violation or a change or a witness of that value or um, that efficacy that we wrapped our egos and our sleeper egos around, when that gets violated or changed, we now have this thing called moral injury. And so I share that to say that we are all on this journey together. We are all learning in some form or fashion, and hopefully we will learn together tonight. Alana, if you can keep me on time, I am very talkative and verbose. So if you can give me like a five blink or something, just let me know.
I got you.
Thank you so much. Last time we were like rushing those last few slides, and I don't want to do that tonight. All right, so let's get into it. So what is moral injury? Can somebody just chime in the chat and let me know kind of what you think about moral injury? And if Cassandra, if you could just read off some of the things that come into the chat, that would be great. What is moral injury? What do you think moral injury is? You could also type "I don't know" in the chat. I accept that.
Violated values,
Yep. Okay.
something that separates you from your inner self.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Let's see what else.
Keep going.
Both of those got thumbs up. A violation of your soul, your deepest part.
Mm. Absolutely.
Someone crossing a boundary that has to do with my values.
Yes. Yeah. These are great. These are great, great, great responses. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay. Phenomenal
A
answer.
change in how I see myself and betrayed trust from a trusted source.
Mm. It's like y'all been through this before. I like it. Like everybody's kind of on that same page. I think we got one last one in there, Cassandra. Maybe two.
Oh yeah, we just got can either be direct or something you've witnessed, and a re-questioning of everything about you and everything in the world being lost.
A word. Thank you all. Absolutely, right? Kind of all of those things encompass moral injury, right? The violation of this kind of deep innermost value or principle or identification of self, these kind of deeply founded values being violated in some form or fashion, and then the subsequent questioning of self. Absolutely. You all rock already. I love it. We're going to have a good time tonight. So I'll give you all kind of the official definition. Moral injury is defined as the lasting psychological, social, cultural, and spiritual impact of an act that violates one's moral beliefs. So that could be right psychological, something that right is impacting your mental state, something that's most traumas right are going to impact us psychologically, right? But also like some sort of lasting effects of some sort of social issue. There are some folks that have maybe left our military, for example, because of how our social dynamic, how our maybe administration has changed a few things. If people are really big believers in diversity, equity, inclusion, and they're like, this is operating outside of my moral boundaries, and I don't want to be a part of it, right? That can be a moral violation for some folks if they stayed. So that's a good example I like to think of. Of course, our right culture is a big one, and of course, our spirituality, and that's for a lot of folks, their spirituality is tied to like how they live their lives, who they define themselves as, what kind of partners they choose, what kind of friends they choose. That spiritual aspect can be completely wrapped and intertwined in their lives. And so to have any of these spaces in our lives violated can just be really hard and damaging, and even harder if we don't have language, if we don't have a way to process it. It says it can cause feelings of shame, guilt, anger, grief, and meaninglessness. And so this concept is not something I invented. I will not take the credit. I want to publicly acknowledge Dr. Jonathan Shea, MD, and colleagues. They coined this term. And so they were studying military members and just seeing this somatic piece of injury, this thematic piece of their trauma that just seemed to be very unique. And then when they further studied police officers, when they studied first responders, they noticed these kind of same themes, these same things going on in terms of how they're feeling, how they're aligning with their values after something has happened or something has been violated. Any questions on that? All right, keep moving. If there's a question, Cassandra, please feel free to interrupt me. Let me know. So there are several causes for moral injury. There is acts of commission. So if someone maybe was ordered to commit an act, so this again is talking more on the military service side, right? If I was ordered to harm someone downrange, right? I'm deployed and this is part of my mission set, but it ends up harming someone, maybe someone who's classified as the enemy in that interaction. That is an act of commission. So we've committed this act. But feeling like we shouldn't have done it, right? Feeling like maybe this wasn't part of who I define myself as, and I've done this thing. This can also play for our military sexual trauma survivors, and we'll get into that in a later slide. But that act of commission can be damaging in some ways, and not necessarily being the person who did the assault, right? The assailant, but maybe some of the things that we did subsequently, maybe not reporting and feeling like, oh my gosh, I have done this thing to the system. I didn't report it. And now feeling this moral injury for not doing that, which we'll talk about people's journeys and how we are navigating those journeys and all the ways that support us, that reduce our triggers and so on, which is why a lot of people don't report. Acts of omission. So this is where failing to do something, right? So maybe I didn't say something, I didn't do something. I intentionally left that thing out. And now it is, again, against my moral. So if I am this, kind, empathetic person, well-boundaried, and then I omitted this feedback or I omitted this action, right? Whatever that might be. And that could be a moral injury. And then finally, kind of the causes that were codified again by Shea and team was betrayal. And that occurs when the individual feels betrayed by a higher authority. This could also be when someone feels betrayed by their peer. And I think that's a big distinction to have when we believe that we all share this same identification, these same morals. For the Air Force, it's integrity, service, and excellence, right? So we all share these main values. And then we watch someone act outside of them. And we're like, wait a minute. I thought we all were in this together. I thought we all were trained to do this together. And now someone is not in alignment with the thing that we thought. And that can absolutely be a moral injury. So keeping in mind some of those causes that were studied specifically with those veterans who went to war, who were in some sort of conflict in their time, and how it showed up for them as it pertains to their kind of deeper person. So some of those events include harming others or watching someone be harmed, right? So if someone saw that they saw, right, let's use the downrange example. So if they see someone being harmed or being killed or being hurt or being taken into maybe custody, and the person watching that says, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. I don't think we should have done that. Maybe we made too quick of a decision. We were acting in our survival brain and we weren't acting in our logical brain. And now we've made this mistake. And that can be very morally injurious. That's where a person says, man, I believe that I'm a person of integrity. I believe I'm a person of service. And I believe I may have acted in service, but this thing that we did just doesn't sit well with me. What do I do about that? Another one is lacking compassion and empathy for a fellow peer, right? So again, this is that betrayal piece where I see this person, but maybe they're just not soldiering on as good. Because how many of us have learned to soldier on in our time, right? We've learned to be like, you know what? I know that I can't see out of my left eye, but I'm just gonna go to work. It's gonna be fine. And we all do this kind of strange thing. Or like, yeah, I know my knee is probably falling off, but I'm gonna go run that ruck march, or I'm gonna go do that thing because I'm a leader, or I'm, all these things. And we just soldier on. And so when someone fails to have empathy for someone who says, you know what, actually, I should probably get that left eye checked out. I should probably put that knee back in place. And we look at them and we're like, wait a minute, like, are you not as strong as I am? Some people might think that. Or are you malingering? I know that used to be a big thing when I was a younger lieutenant. But we would have these ideas about someone, like maybe they're not acting in alignment with excellence because they're taking care of themselves, which I think now we've gotten a lot better with language. And we know that, hey, if that person is not doing well, I want you to take a knee, because in our service, in a way to be excellent, in a way to have integrity, all of those core values, the way we do that is showing up as the best version of ourselves. I think we've gotten a little better, at least in my time. But lacking compassion can absolutely be morally injurious, because you might reflect on that and say, you know what, I should have given them more leeway. I should have given them more generous assumptions about their situation. I don't know what's going on in their lives. I don't know what's happening in their homes. I don't know what their body is like. Maybe I can generously assume better in the future, and just really attacking that moral injury head on. Some other morally injurious events, and I'll build this out, include engaging or witnessing in acts of disproportionate violence, but feeling nothing. And so that is where sometimes, especially when we are conditioned to go downrange, if we are maybe a frontline warfighter, a frontline person in a conflict, sometimes we are conditioned to lack empathy for the quote unquote enemy. And so we might see something that is violent, maybe a little too violent, but it's in an act of conflict. And so we may walk away from that conflict saying, hey, we served our country, we did the thing we were supposed to do. But there's a mindset of, maybe I should have felt more. Maybe I should have showed up better. Maybe we should have had more conversation. Like, I should have felt more about this thing that we did, or how we did it, or what we were ordered to do. And then maybe had those questions with my leadership or with my peers. I should have done something. And that can be the moral injury in and of itself, just questioning, who am I if I didn't act? Who am I if I didn't show up? Who am I if I didn't make the right decision? The next one, making decisions that affect physical or psychological survival of others. Being unable to care for those who were harmed, freezing or fawning in a traumatic event. These are all kinds of aspects of moral injury, again, where we are questioning ourselves. We're questioning, if I am a trained military member, if I'm a trained officer, particularly, I should be able to care for everybody. I should be able to show up. I should be able to fight. I should be able to, right? And all these, we start, my therapist calls it shoulding on ourselves, right? We start shoulding so much. We're like, I should be able to do this. And when I don't, who am I? And so I'm going to keep going back to that question, like, who am I? Because that's really the defining point of this moral injury. Like, what are my morals now if I couldn't act in this situation? And again, we'll talk about survival and what that truly means for the brain and the body here, and why some of those things don't happen, and how we can maybe reverse the idea of, hey, I acted outside of my morals, versus I was just trying to survive. And that language is important. And the last one, deciding not to report or encourage help seeking. So I've seen this when I was a sexual assault response coordinator, SARC. I believe we all call it the same I think Army calls it SHARC, but I think all of us call it SARC, right? But when I was a SARC, one of the big things that people harped on, especially earlier in my time, was when people decided not to report, we would lose our sense of generous assumptions for those people, right? Because again, our values have told us that when we see something, we say something, right? We got to have what they call it, eagle eyes back in the day. We got to see something and say something. And so when a survivor decides that the best thing for their journey is not to report, to not engage in a justice process that could take them through so much scrutiny, so much harm, and they decide not to, one, that survivor is going through their own moral injury of alignment with their own values. But then those around them who say, oh, you should have reported or should not have reported, are also inflicting moral injury on that survivor. And then when we don't encourage someone to get help, if we believe that survivor, which we all should, and we don't encourage them to get help, that can be misalignment with our values. So that was a lot of information. Any questions on these events, these types of events? I want to clarify, this is not an all-inclusive list. This is just some examples that that we've seen that Shay and team have also seen and combined the two. Any questions? Going once, going twice. All
Nothing
right.
seen.
Yeah, please. You said not seen any? Okay. Let me know if you do.
Oh, actually, well, it's just a comment. It says, I found this very helpful, especially the shouldering on self.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I think that, so in kind of in the pre-talk, thank you for sharing that too. In the pre-talk, one of the things that we talked about a little bit was like what it means to advocate for ourselves, right? What it means to um, say that I need something or I need to change something, right? And I think that this soldiering on concept has just been so baked into us, right? I think that it's also socialized into us with our media, with like rom-coms, like all of this kind of romanticizing of military members has led to this ideology that we should just keep, like we are always bred to keep going. When really what advocacy truly looks like is us saying, hey, how about we stop for 1 second? Check in with our bodies, check in with our minds. Like soldiering on also means going to mental health. Soldiering on also means taking care of yourself. So. All right, let's keep going. Show my cookies. There we go. Oh, wait, you know what? I can see it on my screen, but it didn't show up on that one. So I want to make sure y'all see deciding not to report anchor. So let's get into the kind of moral injury cycle. So moral injury is can be cyclical. So it starts with the event, right? That's damaging, whatever that event might look like. And then it can be experienced in a couple of different ways, right? If you are a reader of Besser van der Kolk, one of my favorite authors, The Body Keeps the Score is a phenomenal book and a great resource. First couple of chapters are a little rough, so make sure you watch your triggers and check in with yourself, but it's a phenomenal book that talks about how trauma is experienced. We can feel it and think about it, but then it also could show up in that knee pain or that back pain or that twitching eye, right? Our bodies keep score of trauma sometimes, even if we don't keep it in the ways that we're conditioned to believe we should. So it can be an assault on the mind and the body. And then from there, it kind of flows to assessment. Like, does it fit with the moral framework or worldview of my actions, right? Does it fit with what I believe I am? Does it fit with my super ego identification of who I am? Does it fit with the morals that I've been taught in the institution that I'm in, like the military? Does it fit with, for Air Force service, excellence, and integrity? Does it fit within those? And we got to assess that. And that's what our brains and our bodies do. And then from there, it flows to what we call dissonance. So you're kind of between that, like it says, appraisal of the event versus your belief system, right? So if the world is just, I am going to act in alignment with my values. If my values say that I'm a boundaried and empathetic person, then I should be acting with boundaries and empathy in everything I do. But in this situation, did I show up in that way? And so now I'm caught between the two. Maybe I didn't show up as boundaried and empathetic. What do I do there? And that kind of feeds right back into that assault of the mind and body. Like, oh my gosh, again, who am I? We go back to that question. Who am I? Because I'm not acting in alignment, even though I truly believe at my depth, this is who I am. And then it goes into all those feelings, right? Shame, guilt, meaninglessness, purposelessness, questioning our identity, questioning who we are, questioning the institution that we're a part of, if we cannot act in alignment with it, right? All of those feelings kind of come up. In here, it talks about like loss of spirituality. Maybe I'm questioning my God or my deity or my belief system. And then you'll see in this chart, the cycle doesn't just complete like a full circle. It starts going a little bit back and forth, right? It might go into negative coping mechanisms and not so great behavior, because sometimes we want to take our minds out of it. We don't want to keep thinking about who we are. We want to be in alignment with something that may not be good for us. And that could be the negative coping with drinking alcohol or drugs or sex. I've seen that with a lot of the survivors I've worked with might lean into different things that just aren't great for their bodies. I won't judge anybody's response, but we'll just say there are some things that are good for us and some things that may not be so good for our personal journey. And we engage in those things depending on what they do for how we're acting in those moments. And the survivors that I've worked with, I've definitely seen some of the self-harming behaviors, hypersexuality behaviors, drinking, drug use, all of those things. I have also seen what we would call positive things, but in excess, like working out too much, right? That, oh, I just need to relieve the stress. Oh, I just need to lean more into, this fit persona of being a military person. So I'm just going to go to the gym and I'm going to pound it out as much as I can. I'm going to be there 3 times a day, what have you. And that excessive working out may look healthy. Maybe they are getting fitter, but their mind is not fit and they're struggling through that. And so you could oscillate between the feelings and the behaviors or just experience both at the same time. And then it could keep going, right? If we don't answer the question, who am I? If we cannot draw the connection between what we've assessed and what we've maybe disassociated from, or what we've separated from our deep ideology of who we are, and then the act or what happened to us or what happened around us, we could repeat that cycle a lot. And what I've seen with survivors is that cycle repeats in their healing, later in their healing journey, where they didn't necessarily have language at the time that it happened. They maybe didn't seek weren't encouraged to get help seeking or didn't seek help and did not have the language. And so they've been repeating this cycle, but they don't understand why. And now they're repeating this question of who am I and not really finding an answer. And the cycle just continues. I think I saw a comment come in.
Yep. So a comment just came in that said there are both positive and negative coping mechanisms, and those that begin positive but become negative.
That's a word. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. There are things that, right? Let's talk about some of the survivors and maybe experiencing a bit of hypersexuality, which we will not shame or blame anybody in here. I'm all about the body positivity. And so maybe they say to themselves, my body is mine. I want to finally have agency over what I do with my body, how I dress, where I go, who I'm intimate with. And that, to me, the reclamation of your body is powerful, can be very powerful. But it also can harm if you are harmed again, possibly by people who take advantage of that ideology, or if you don't have the language for the boundaries that you truly want to set. You don't have some of those protections in place for yourself. That can be really hard. And so definitely the positives can turn negative and the negatives can maybe turn positive. Maybe that workout that was 3 times a day that you were pounding out maybe turns into a yoga set and a leg day, and now it's a little bit more balanced, and you're finding your rhythm, but also keeping your mind healthier. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, next. So let's talk about how omission, commission, and betrayal tie into military sexual trauma. So at the VA, they use the term sexual trauma, right? Military sexual trauma, because it is for typically people who are harmed as service members or could have been harmed by service members. And so when I was a SARC, we actually took care of civilians who may have been harmed by military members. We called it a military nexus. And that had its own moral injury to it. It had its own kind of systematic like betrayal. Like, oh, I thought our service members were these type of people and I was harmed by one. What does that look like? And so working with survivors that were not uniformed, had never served, was a very just interesting distinction in how they thought of the military and the moral injury that they got from their assault. So it also includes sexual harassment. And I know once when Congress kind of did a reshuffle of the SAPR programs, or the sexual assault prevention and response programs, one of the things they looked at was that, hey, sexual harassment actually ties far more with SAPR than it does with equal opportunity. Let's kind of shift that over. And we saw that shift in 21, 22 timeframe, maybe a little, 22, 23 maybe. But we saw that shift because sexual harassment can absolutely see the same impacts as military sexual trauma. You could see that and see kind of those same symptoms in those folks. But it can include any kind of sexual trauma during active duty. or reserve duty, guard duty, right? Anything that's associated with military nexus. So some of those examples include, and I think we're all kind of tracking these big ones, so I won't just read through a few of them. Being pressured or coerced. That coercion could come as a rank-specific coercion, so something to keep in mind, especially for those of us in the room. Non-consensual sexual activity, being overpowered or physically forced, touched or grabbed in a sexual way that made you feel uncomfortable. This is kind of where people may call it bullying or hazing, where they're touched inappropriately, maybe their butt is slapped or their parts are grabbed, and they just classify it as bullying instead of classifying it at what it truly is, which is sexual trauma. No one should touch you without your consent. Or comments. And so I thought it was interesting when I saw this definition for the VA about even just the commentary about someone's body or sexual activity when it is completely unwanted and threatening, and how I'm so glad that we've changed how we approach sexual assault response and prevention, and including some of those things, because we need to unpack when somebody's body is violated, not by touch, but by words. And now they are frightened to be in that work environment, or they're frightened to go to that place or that party or what have you. And I'm so glad that we're acknowledging that now and able to take care of those folks. Because before it was like, hey, go to EO, but then there's like this EO can't really prove what happened. And now it becomes this this situation that isn't affirming of what happened to that survivor. So I'm glad that we've changed our language. And I think it's important to call out when someone is talking about your body or talking to you about what they want to do with you, but it's unwanted. That is something that we need to support survivors on too. So all of those things, again, not a completely inclusive, or it's not, everything's not on this list. Wow, I cannot talk today. But everything's not on this list. So there's always some other examples, but that's just some of them that the VA cites on their website about military trauma. Any questions on that before we move forward? Hydrate. All right, we'll keep moving. So when we experience moral injury, especially as a trauma survivor, when we feel like we have been portrayed by the institution, when we feel like we have omitted something, maybe not reporting or not, whatever we feel like we've omitted from that scenario, or if we feel like we've committed an act like shaming someone who has survived sexual trauma, or feeling shame about our sexual trauma, we go through these kind of shame and guilt cycles. We kind of talk through like, who am I? Am I being judged? Am I in alignment with my values? Are the people around me disappointed? I'm an officer, so I should be an example of what our values are. Am I doing that, right? And then the guilt and the shame kind of comes from that. And so I just wanted to quickly specify the difference. I know I taught about guilt and shame the last time I spoke, but I think it's really important to just make a quick distinction. And so guilt is kind of arises from actions, implies that you're a good person who made a mistake, gives a way for self-reflection, kind of makes that pathway. Shame stems from those negative belief systems and perceptions of self. So folks who have moral injuries are often going to see more shame as a response to that moral injury, because it's talking about that kind of belief system, that spiritual belief about life or the institution or themselves. Triggers about self-doubt and self-criticism show up very often with that kind of shame cycle. So keeping in mind that some folks might feel guilt, but a lot of folks might feel shame about what's going on, what they did, how they contributed, or how the institution has defined them and how they show up, who they are in that scenario. And I think the last piece on here that I think is important to those who are experiencing moral injury is they're questioning, like, should I have done something different? What would have put me back in alignment with the thing that I believe is who I am, or is who I am in this institution? So if I'm supposed to be in alignment with integrity, service, and excellence, what would have brought me back? What could I have done? For a survivor, that causes that additional shame because we start questioning some of those other things. And again, I think we've changed our language, but back in the day, it was, what did I wear? Did I drink too much? Should I have been at that gathering, that party, did I not set a boundary? Did I say no loud enough? Did I freeze, fawn, or didn't fight enough, right? And we start questioning not only who we are, but what we could have done better. And that leads to self-blame. And when we're in that self-blame, it's really hard to come out of that. So you're coupling your sense of self with you caused this, and now it's hard to find language for how to get out of that. And that's where we can encourage help seeking so that our folks aren't trapped in shame and self-blame. So that can be really hard for our folks to just navigate. And especially when they're trying to soldier on. It's just a lot of compiling. And I've seen that with the survivors that I've worked with, where they've compiled all of those feelings into one and often kind of wrap them in silence. And they don't know how to navigate. They don't know what to say. They don't know where their resources are. So we want to get after that. And the way I love to get after these things is some scenarios. So this is where I'm going to ask for your involvement. So, shake it out, take a big diaphragmatic breath if you need to. We're going to do a few scenarios to kind of walk through this concept, and then we will close things out. So, and I'm just going to move my screen a little bit because sometimes it is hard to see here. Okay, so first scenario. A special operations officer was assaulted by their live-in partner. So keep tuned to the details. They were assaulted by their live-in partner. The member froze in the middle of the attack. So, right, body just maybe did not move, did not do anything, paused to take in information. Now this service member is finding it hard to give orders and focus at work. What do you think was going through their mind? What do you think is going through that member's mind? And when I say member, it's the person who was harmed. What do you think was going through their mind? Feel free to type it in the chat.
Shame.
Yep. Absolutely. Lots of shame. Lots of shame. What else?
They don't deserve to be a leader.
Oof. Oof.
They no longer trust themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Confusion and betrayal. The thought, if I couldn't care for myself, how can I care for anyone else? It was my fault.
Going. Yeah.
How can they be a spec ops officer and not be able to protect themselves? Hypocrisy.
Yeah, absolutely. These are great responses. Thank you, guys. I couldn't agree more that self-trust, not only in who I am, right, going back to that question, but like who I'm trained to be. And I think there is some niches to commissioned officer communities and these kind of special duty, special operations communities where they are conditioned a certain way, right? Us as officers, former officers, we were conditioned to be leaders. We were conditioned to give the order and hold the line, right? I'm going to tell you what needs to be done. I'm going to show you where we're marching, and I need you to help get there, right? Our job is to get there. But what about me in this situation? Who am I if I can't even give that order in this space with my partner? Who am I? How do I show up for you as a leader, right? How can I trust my training? How can I trust who I am if I can't show up in this way? How does culture play in what that member was thinking, right? And I think I may have kind of answered that, jumped the gun a little bit, but right, what culture maybe made that member say, now I can't give these orders. Maybe this isn't, maybe I don't fit here. What culture has been baked into that person? I think someone kind of alluded to it with the
Go ahead. It says we are action oriented and the elite. Special ops.
Yeah. That action-oriented one is a big one. I found that some survivors, even when I was working in the SARC world in 2020, folks were saying I know how to fight. I took jujitsu. And it was like, wow, I'm sorry that you believe that you could have done that in that moment when our natural neurobiological response was to freeze. And so I love that someone put in there action oriented. Go ahead, Cassandra.
We have two more.
Yeah, please.
I'm supposed to be tougher than regular service members, and
Mm.
there's sort of no room for compassion for ourselves.
Oof. Thank you for that. Absolutely.
Wait, we have one more.
Yeah,
Sorry.
please, please, no, don't apologize.
Uh, the freezing perhaps has them second guessing the culture and training they received. If it doesn't work in an attack situation, what
Mm.
future situations will I freeze in?
Oof. Absolutely. Yes, right? Who am I? Who am I? Will I freeze again? Can I do this job? Right? And now we're questioning, we're blaming ourselves, all of these things. Um, we got to remind survivors that our initial response is to freeze. When the bear comes in the home, we freeze because we got to take in information and figure it out first. And then we make it, well, we don't make the decision. Our biology makes that decision. And often our biology tells us to run, to flee. It doesn't tell us to fight. I feel like there was another comment. I don't know if I heard something.
Nope.
Okay, no, thank you.
Nope, there was. Sorry.
Oh, please, no, you're fine.
All right. Apart from military culture, in the larger culture, I should be able to choose a person that I'm safe with. How could I have chosen so wrong?
Ooh, I didn't even think about that. That was phenomenal. Right? If I'm a leader, right? If I'm supposed to be designing the best team to do the best for our mission, how could I not choose the best partner? Right? Oof, that's deep. Um, who am I? It goes always back to who am I, right? That is a big moral injury. Um, and it's reminding, right? Getting out of that culture is reminding survivors that all of these things that are baked into us are good for certain missions, they're good for certain jobs. When it comes to our survival, we are going to act in the best interest of our survival. That is how our biology works. It's not always a conscious effort. It's very much our bodies acting in survival. Great.
Latetia,
Yes, ma'am.
I know, amazing. I'm loving this discussion and your presentation. I just want to let you know for your pacing, we have 10 minutes left.
10 minutes. All right. We got a few more scenarios. We'll get through it. Thank you for the reminder. Because we can get into it because y'all got some great comments. Now, the next presentation might include some of these. If you want to be cited, let me know. These were phenomenal responses. And I think it's so important for us to engage in this discussion to kind of talk through some of the things we even felt as survivors. All right. Next scenario. Y'all did great. All right. So when we are a witness, right? This is witnessing a harmful treatment of another survivor. So I witnessed a close friend and fellow survivor of sexual assault being shunned by peers after reporting. This friend faces bullying, harassment, and is ultimately pressured into leaving the unit. Sad to say that this has happened to folks. And I think we've gotten better with reprisal and, reporting those things, but definitely has happened to people. But let's get into the discussion. So, how does witnessing a friend's suffering affect an individual's own sense of moral responsibility and justice in a military culture? Talk to me.
Anger,
Anger. Oof, absolutely. I would be really upset, right? Keep going. What else?
helplessness to stop it,
Mm,
responsibility, weakness. I know how she feels and I should have spoken up.
mm, mm. Yeah, right. Who am I? Am I a good wingman or
Uh,
buddy?
failure, failure in the moment,
Mhm. Wow.
loss of unit trust,
Mm,
betrayal, a lack of safety, care, and support in the military culture, defeat.
yeah, yeah. Who am I? Who is this institution? If we can witness someone go through this and still harm them, still bully them, still harass them, force
Was
them out of
I
the community. Go ahead. Yeah.
was I quiet to keep from being bullied myself?
Mm, yeah. Did I act in my own survival? It's a good one. Go ahead.
Not a person, not a human, but a tool for the nation's interests.
That's a word. That's a word. That's a word I think all of us unpack at some point when we leave service, right? Really good comments. Man, y'all are good at this. Go ahead. I think one more came through.
I would go down swinging, defending my friend from my unit.
Talk about it, because we 10 toes down for the survivors around us. I love that. Because that's a one way that we can be supportive, right? And so let's talk about it while we're there. And I know we're getting short on time. Talk about how we can create a supportive culture. What do we do? How do we be 10 toes down for those survivors and change the culture? How do we make people feel safe again? How do we tell them to knock it off? What do we do? How do we create that supportive culture?
I think we talk about it.
Mm. We talk about it. We talk about it. Do we think that was helpful? Do we, what are we doing here? I love to ask questions that aren't questions when crazy things are happening around me. Just like, okay, so tell me more about what we're thinking here. I'm just, just curious, right? That's usually how I frame it. Like, no, just tell me more about that. Oh, is that what we think? Do we think that that's really helpful for that person? Like, that's my, I want you to think about what you're doing, right? But watching someone be bullied or harassed is next level. Like, me and you are going to IG, right? We're going to create that culture where it's just not allowed. It's not happening. Right? I think one more came in.
See, I want to ask if this is how they would treat a family member or a best friend.
Yeah.
Is this how you would treat your mother, sister?
Mm. Yeah. Is this what you would want for them? That's a great one, right? What would you do? How would you want to be treated if something happened to you, right? And this is why believing survivors is so important and so impactful. We got to believe survivors. All right, we'll go to one more scenario and then we will wrap this bad boy up. Thank you all. All right, last one. Um, the command leadership team downplays an incident of sexual assault and suggests that the service member may have misinterpreted the situation. Later, the perpetrator is promoted. Whew. How might this experience impact the service member's sense of loyalty and trust in their leadership?
What about unit squad cohesion? Either that or perhaps the bullier does want to ostracize the reporter because they view the reporter as disrupting unit cohesion and no trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that happen, right? In certain communities where, hey, you know what, we're just going to hide that because we don't want people to think that we have a bad culture or that I'm a bad leader for allowing this culture. When really silence is the way that we're allowing this culture to thrive. Go ahead, Cassandra.
No trust and feeling like an outsider, loss of trust in the system.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. A lot of people leave our ranks. Good leaders, good service members will leave because they don't feel like they can be safe or trust what's happening and trust that they can be protected. Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, we have so much anger, betrayal, and isolation, a sense that there was no accountability within the command.
Yeah, that's real. Yeah. And if they're not held accountable, what does that mean for your further protection? Are you protected anywhere else you go? That can be really hard.
So
Go ahead.
checked out, wanting a transfer if possible,
Yeah. Yeah.
ostracized,
Yeah.
backstabbed, feeling shame because it's another way people are telling you, I don't believe you.
Yeah. By letting that behavior go on. Absolutely. You have validated my perpetrator so much so that they get promoted out of that or not out of that situation. But yeah.
This is why it also goes unreported.
Exactly. Exactly. And when folks don't talk about it, when they don't have access to resources, when they cannot get language for their healing, they go on unhealed. And that is
Like
bad for us. Yeah, go ahead. You're fine.
like the institutional values are BS.
Yeah. Should I even align myself with integrity, service, and excellence if y'all aren't going to? The leadership isn't going to, right? Oof. Y'all are on one today. I love it. I love it. All right, so we will skip the scenario and just kind of wrap this bad boy up together. So now what do, right? We've seen betrayal, omission, commission. We've seen ostracism. We've seen the culture break down and hopefully try to build it up. In what ways do we do that? right? Again, we will live in a shame-free, blame-free zone as long as it's a zone I can control, right? Under our hands, where we can lead, where we can foster culture, we need to make sure that we're not judging ourselves and we are not judging other people. Everyone heals in their own time, in their own way. They're always learning who they are again, and we have to be mindful of that and be generously assuming that their journey is their journey and they're on it. And then help where we can, right? Engage with some sort of resource. Those of us who are survivors can engage with resources or encourage help seeking.
We have one more comment.
Yeah.
So spend time with those who understand and require no explanation.
That's a word. Create community. Create community. Create a community like SAN and have your experience validated with other survivors who can point you in the direction of resources or just say, hey, I see you, right? Create community. Oof, yes, thank you, whoever said that. That was beautiful. And report when ready. We will not force anyone to report. There are so many other ways to heal outside of the justice process that, I mean, if I'm being honest with y'all, has a lot of faults. And so there are so many other ways. There's restorative justice, and then there's also not engaging in justice at all and just being part of your own healing journey. I saw another comment came through.
Yep. You might need help to find those who understand and along those lines, help others to making yourself available.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Latetia, take another additional 5 minutes to no rush. You have 5 more minutes to close it out. I'm loving this. I know we're loving this, so thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. All right, we're gonna wrap it up very soon. The last piece on here is alignment, right? We talked a lot about alignment, a lot about who am I? And survivors often rediscover who they are. And that is okay. It's okay to find language for that realignment. Maybe you no longer align with integrity, service, and excellence, and it is time to move on to something that is more in alignment with your purpose, right? I'm leaving the military at the end of the year to be in alignment with the trauma therapist that I believe I am. I want to align, and that is who I am in my survivor journey. You may be different in your survivor journey. You also may be that colonel who changes this whole process. That might be part of your journey too. Stay in alignment. Find out who you are outside of this trauma and align yourself. And be compassionate. We are all human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to not necessarily operate in alignment with our values, but we can get back to course when we truly know what they are. And then here are some resources, because I'm a big fan of resources. I will always advocate for the DoD Safe Helpline. Worked a lot with them when I was a SARC. Beyond MST mobile app actually has some really good grounding exercises, some good therapeutic things for us to engage with. I believe it is run by the VA. There is an organization called Make the Connection that connects survivors of all genders. And then I didn't know a lot about this podcast when I was a SARC, but as I've been doing support groups with trauma survivors, especially those who are veterans, Resource on the Go podcast is actually really good. They do like 17 to 20-minute podcasts. This is not a marketing campaign. I just really like their materials, and they put out some really, really good information. And then, of course, no matter what, help seeking will never be shamed in these environments. So if someone does have a crisis, they are in crisis, whatever crisis looks like for them, because crisis looks different for our people. Veterans Crisis Line is phenomenal. If folks are still serving actively, Military One Source is also a phenomenal resource when we are looking for help. So just some phenomenal resources for us. And then that is
it. Was also added in the chat, the Headstrong project.
Ooh. Let me write that down. Headstrong project?
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. That's not a resource I've heard of, but I love it. And thank you for recommending it. Got it. Any questions?
Latetia, I'm going to pop in. First of all, thank you. What a presentation. I love your energy. So grateful for that. So appreciative also for the additional resources. I just want to remind everybody, now we will stop our recording.